Welcome to our presentation. Today we are going to be discussing why we are fascinated by serial killers. We will address this by looking at four aspects: fascination, sensationalism, romanticism, and portrayal. We will provide you with a brief overview of what the definition of serial murder is. There was an effort in 1998 to do this by passing a federal law, but it was found to be quite restrictive in its utilization, as it was created so that police could request the help of the FBI. On their website, the FBI provides a general definition of serial murder, describing it as the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same offenders in separate events. Here are a few of the common motivations of serial killers. A serial killer may be doing it out of anger, criminal enterprise, financial gain, ideologies, power or thrill, psychosis, and lastly, sexually based. Let's look at a list of potential traits. It is important to note here that there is not a set list of the traits that serial killers would possess. A diagnosis of serial killer does not exist in the DSM-5, but they are commonly associated with having elements of antisocial personality disorder. Additionally, you may have heard of the McDonald triad. While in the past there has been some evidence found that shows possessing these elements may indicate violence later in life, there is a severe lack of empirical research. However, the presence of these behaviors are often a sign of potential abuse or mental illness. It can give us the opportunity to intervene earlier.
Hi, my name is Tyra. Perhaps we love serial killers for the same reason we cannot look away from highway accidents, due to the human tendency towards voyeurism. Lemmy Barra suggested that there was a positive correlation between voyeurism, social comparison, and the consumption of reality TV, meaning that media viewers may use reality television of serial killers to satisfy a voyeuristic need and as a way to socially compare to what they are viewing. On the other hand, Scott Bond's book, Why We Love Serial Killers, suggests that humans have a natural affinity for empathy, and that socially comparing ourselves to serial killers allows us to empathize with and humanize them, trying to make them less scary, but at the same time keeping a safe distance from them and their actions by dehumanizing them. We may humanize them in the way that we try to understand them and try understanding why they behave so unnaturally, but we dehumanize them by creating a moral boundary between us and them, a stark dichotomy between good and evil. This dichotomy, Bond says, keeps us at a safe distance because we can dissociate from their evil behavior and think of ourselves as good people compared to them, which helps us feel better about ourselves. But like it or not, serial killers are human just like the rest of us. So perhaps another explanation is an order. David Schmidt's book, Natural Born Celebrities, states that the serial killer is as quintessentially American a figure as the cowboy. Both figures capture the spirit of American individualism and pushing of boundaries, and both have transcended their lived reality to achieve near mythical status. So perhaps the uniqueness and extreme individuality of the serial killer is what we crave for ourselves. We admire simply the rebel attitude they have, the big middle finger they give to the constraints of society. Perhaps still an even simpler explanation may be at play. David Schmidt explains that a possible reason for why we are fascinated by serial killers is due to a simple neurological phenomenon. We are intrigued by serial killers for the same reason we are intrigued by horror films, or the rush that they give us. Schmidt explains that when we witness a tragedy, our amygdala reacts using a fight or flight response, which stimulates an adrenaline rush. Once our frontal cortex analyzes our situation and recognizes the tragedy as a non-threat, we can gaze upon the tragedy, facing our fears without risk of harm. The same way we can gaze upon horror films with intense emotion while being aware of the safety of watching it through the television.
In this section, I'll explore sensationalism. I'm Frank Dion. Sensationalism is based around the idea of arousing emotion within the audience. This means that the news or media is designed to elicit a stimulating response. About et al. Identify three types of sensationalism: the topic, which is the act or event that the report or media is about, usually about sex or violence. The second is the human exemplar. This is the person in which the story can be wrapped around, whether it's a victim or a villain. The third is the features. These are the surrounding details that stimulate the audience. This can be achieved through language, pictures, tone of the speaker, or even down to the small details like the font used to write the report. So, how do these three types of sensationalism apply to serial killers? Well, serial killers or the victims can become the exemplar. Their kills and methods are the topics, and language and images, music and tone are all the features. To demonstrate how images are designed to arouse emotion, I will look at the representation of Ted Bundy and Jack the Ripper. Ted Bundy in this first image is represented in a romantic way, cast with Zac Efron. The movie is titled Extremely Wicked and Shockingly Evil and Vile. Words that are designed to entice the audience by using a darker tone. The next movie is a simple title, Ted Bundy, so the media uses imagery instead. Notice how the use of shadows suggests Bundy's sinister nature, the piercing stare meant to intimidate. Finally, the newspaper. We see that Ted Bundy's name is nowhere on the headline. Instead, we have phrases like love by killer and grisly secret. Are you? This language is designed to invoke a fear response. And in case you thought this was a new phenomenon, it's been present ever since mass media started. Looking at an early example, Jack the Ripper. Similar to the first Ted Bundy movie, From Hell uses Johnny Depp to sell the film, but relies on a sensational title. Jack the Ripper has a simple title, but utilizes dark imagery. And the newspaper uses grisly headlines like ghastly murder and dreadful mutilation, carefully chosen words to sell papers. Notice how the media use of sensationalism is designed to dehumanize serial killers, making them into icons. So, what impact does sensationalization have on society? First, let's look at our fascination and how it influences media to reinvent monsters to elicit new levels of fear. Think back on the two newspaper articles with Jack the Ripper. It was a ghastly murder, which is a quaint term similar to something you'd find in an Edgar Allan Poe novel, whereas the Love Bite Killer is terrifying and has a sharp, impactful language, turning the person from a villain in Victorian fiction to somebody on the streets prowling for a new victim, maintaining a new level of fear. The media creates these icons by the amount of coverage that they get. The more terrifying, the longer serial killers will stay in the spotlight. Think of people like Jeffrey Dahmer. His coverage has kept his legacy alive, whereas someone like Dennis Nelson is less known, even though his crimes are very similar to that of Dahmer. Fine, there is a copycat effect, which sees people emulate killers. Think of cases like Zodiac copycat Eddie Seda, who, inspired by the original Zodiac killer, killed people with knives and homemade guns, as well as sending cryptic letters to the police. Well, that's going to do it for me.
In The Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is characterized as a sophisticated cannibal who earlier in his life had a well-established career as a forensic psychiatrist. His experience allows for the easy manipulation of those around him, which he uses to his advantage throughout the movie. We cannot help but become intrigued by someone of his nature and find ourselves compelled to learn more about him, as if he were some kind of science experiment. However, the presentation of Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs can easily mislead individuals into thinking that this highly stereotypical representation of a serial killer is accurate. Lecter is especially romanticized in the sequel, Hannibal, where he is depicted with more muted villainous traits. In this day and age, the internet makes it very convenient for people to make contact with those in prison, specifically a site called meetaninmate.com, where it promotes relationships between citizens and offenders. This is concerning, as the individual may be contacting the inmate with an unrealistic perception and put themselves in a vulnerable position. Let's look at an example that is a complete contrast of Hannibal Lecter. In Joker, Arthur Fleck suffers from an illness that causes him to laugh uncontrollably and subsequently is treated as an outcast. He is unpredictable and taken advantage of on numerous occasions, leading to emotional outbursts that result in the death of multiple people. In this case, the audience is left feeling sorry for Arthur. The insight as to how his condition affects him and observing the buildup of resentment, brutal assaults, and society's overall lack of understanding are what causes the sense of pity. Joker helps give a voice to those who are misunderstood and symbolizes their pain in a format that those not impacted by mental illness can grasp and acknowledge. It shows how people can be pushed to the brink. In fact, the audience may even feel vindicated on Arthur's behalf when he commits murder. There is some concern, however, over films of this nature piling onto incorrect perception that all mentally ill people are violent or dangerous. Those who take the film at face value and do not take the time to think critically about the film's message are not only becoming misinformed, but are perpetuating the negative stigmas surrounding mental illness that plagues society. Another area of pop culture where there is an interest in serial killers is video games. Set in the classroom environment, the objective of Yandere Simulator is to eliminate the rivals that will try to steal the protagonist's love interest each week, but maintain the image of a sweet and innocent girl. Although video games can convey the same message as a movie or television show, the contrast we want to highlight is that the player is actively engaging with the romanticized content. In doing so, it can increase the quantity and the intensity of the player's thoughts surrounding the content and be encouraged by the reinforcing nature of video games. While this does not necessarily mean that the players of these games are going to go on a killing spree, it could bolster some of the inaccurate perceptions that exist within them.
Our presentation thus far has explained the reasons why we are captivated by serial killers, as well as various ways in which we form connections with the idealized versions of the criminals. One reason the media may choose a sensationalized or romanticized view of serial killers is because it's difficult to pin down an accurate portrayal of serial killers. There are many backgrounds, motivations, and situations which lead people to commit serial murder. Earlier in the presentation, the definition of serial murder was mentioned, as quoted from the FBI. However, an article by Liebert noted that the definition of serial murder is subject to interpretation of the crime scene for theories regarding motivation for murder, and that in order for a killing to look like a serial killing, there are assumptions that have to connect seemingly random events. These assumptions are that one or more persons are murdering over a span of time and definable space, and that there is a common denominator of motivation. They go on to discuss various motivations such as lust, terrorism, cultism, or delusional thinking. Liebert also highlights the harm that media attention brings due to public interference in the process of investigation. The public has bizarre theories and demands for quick solutions. As well, he notes that serial murders are notoriously difficult to investigate and require patient, plotting work which is not popularized on television. Another article by Bones notes that law enforcement also uses media to portray serial killers, but unlike news sources, they have more time and resources to paint a better picture about crime. They also work to make sure that the facts given are as accurate as possible, which may include details which were not available at the time the news sources had printed their articles. Law enforcement accounts of serial killers differ from the media portrayal because police profilers are known to be experts on the subject as they research serial killers extensively. Common profiles of serial killers are that they are often white, middle-aged, and male due to the sexual aspects of serial homicide, and the reasons behind the crime may be due to control, hate, desire, or power, most of which are focused against women. Another characteristic of serial killers from the law enforcement perspective, according to the Bones article, is that almost all serial killers are addicted to alcohol or recreation or prescription drugs. They're potentially more likely to abuse substances due to a lack of strong social ties, or that their parents were abusers as well. Serial killers are often extremely intelligent, but cannot socialize well due to lack of learned skills and social control. Lastly, law enforcement considers most serial killers to be of sane mind, but note that they are adept at manipulation. The criminals may differentiate between right and wrong, but simply do not care about societal regulations of such. Many serial killers may have mental illness ranging from personality disorder to severe depression, but are not considered criminally insane. Bones noted many of these commonalities between serial killer profiles as possible areas of future research. Though both law enforcement and reporters use media to publicly portray an image of serial killers, law enforcement works to give an accurate portrayal, while media often sensationalizes or romanticizes the killer in order to entice readers. As well, media is given a shorter time frame in which to collect information, as their job is to let the public know what is happening immediately, yet still give accurate information. Law enforcement has a top priority of catching the killer, followed by releasing facts about them to the public. However, media can help law enforcement, as their timely release of gathered, accurate information can be done more quickly and simply than the longer and more detailed process that law enforcement must go through. As such, individual characteristics that the media highlights may actually be useful to law enforcement.
In conclusion, whether our fascination of serial killers comes from our human tendency towards voyeurism, our human need to empathize and distance ourselves from what we find repulsive, their unorthodox defiance of societal rules, or simply due to the neurological rush we get from viewing tragedy at a safe distance. We can probably all agree that serial killers are fascinating and definitely a topic worth exploring.
Sensationalism is just one of the reasons why we become fascinated. It is specifically designed to entice the audience by arousing emotional or physical reactions. It does this through three types of methods, either through the topic, the exemplar, or the format. Sensationalism can impact media methods, a serial killer's iconography and legacy, and the public response.
When depicting serial killers as a form of entertainment, we must be cautious about the message that is being sent out, as the implications from these romanticizations can have a detrimental effect on both the perceptions of mental illness and the safety of society due to the often unquestioned and easily interpretable nature of this medium.
Media and law enforcement portray serial killers differently based on the time frame they have to create these portrayals and their intentions with the information, whether it is for sale or for safety. However, the information collected by both sources may help each party in one form or another.
We look forward to your questions, and here are our references.